Hey, welcome back, everyone. I want to talk about Trump's hearing yesterday and where this is going. As I mentioned, and I will state again, this is one giant nothing burger. And frankly, even a lot of the Democrats, even a lot of the folks who absolutely hate Trump, even CNN, they're all saying it, folks. This is totally a giant nothing burger. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. Frankly, it's what I expected it would be, and what we've been talking about it probably would be. I'm going to show you video clips of people who would not normally agree with me, agreeing with me on this, and so we're going to go into it. This is shocking abuse of justice on the hands of DA Alvin Bragg, and frankly, I mean, the Biden administration is going to have to wipe their hands clean of this and prove somehow that they were not involved, because this looks absolutely like politicized justice. This looks absolutely like prosecutorial misconduct. And even if it does go through, there are loopholes present within the indictment itself, which people are already pointing out, which Epoch Times itself actually pointed to yesterday, which could not only get this moved out of state, meaning they lose their entire stacked jury and everything like that. But in addition to this, frankly, the thing just doesn't hold up. This does not hold water at all. So we'll go into it, folks. That said, thank you for being here. Always a pleasure. Those of you on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, we will jump over exclusively to Epoch TV after about 25 minutes, so be sure to join us there. That said, folks, let's jump into what's happening. All right. Well, again, we've been covering this for a while, and it's pretty much exactly what we said it would be. Not to do the whole "we said it already" type thing, but pretty much this is exactly what we suspected it would be. It's very hollow. Let me explain. First of all, Trump had his arraignment yesterday. The actual trial, the next court date is not until December. And the Democrats did it in such a way that it's right before the Republican primaries, which in and of itself is a very strange time to move this, meaning that Trump, during his entire campaign up to the Republican primaries, is going to be basically dealing with this shadow of false prosecution. And as even the Biden White House is allegedly discussing, according at least to Fox News, they're saying that basically the Biden White House, Biden believed that Trump was going to win. Biden's advisors are saying Trump was going to win the election. And they believe that this will split the moderates against Trump. And so they believe that based on this, Trump will lose. This is according again to Fox News, citing their own sources based on internal discussions in the Biden White House. So take it for what it's worth. They're doing it in such a way where the truth and the ability to challenge it is far enough out that the entire campaign leading up to the Republican primaries is going to be dealing with the question, is Trump a criminal? Is Trump going to be indicted? I would say, though, that based on the fact that even CNN is saying this is embarrassing, it's so bad, essentially, that this is so completely hollow, there's no way it's going to stand up. Even like literally one day after the acquittal, after the arraignment, the acquittal later. And not only that, but of course, Alvin Bragg's probably going to be investigated on this as well. Alvin Bragg, I should note, revealed 34 felony charges against Donald Trump. The problem, well, all 34 of these felony charges are basically the exact same crime presented in different ways. And so Alvin Bragg found a way to charge Trump essentially with the same crime 34 times. And in addition to that, frankly, he's doing it in a way that does not actually state the actual crime they're basing it on. I'll explain the loophole within that a bit later. The indictment doesn't actually clearly define the crime that they're using as kind of the background to justify some of this, which in and of itself is, again, I mean, a pretty serious loophole within any prosecution, let alone one being used to break, let alone one that's being used to break precedent to target a political candidate during a presidential election, and also breaking precedent going after the former president of the United States, which has never been done before. Normally, if you're going to break that much precedent, the guy better have done something really, really, really bad, like murder or arson or something terrible like that. And what do they have here? They have what's normally a misdemeanor. They have something that normally people never get charged for. And they have something that doesn't even clearly state in the indictment the larger crime used to justify this entire case. It is embarrassing. I can't see how these people can wake up and look at themselves in the mirror and put their suits on and think they're legitimate, like normal people. This is a just total disgrace to the American justice system, and frankly, even a lot of people on the left, and even the very, very, very far left anti-Trumpers, many of them are saying almost the same thing right now. Now, all these charges do relate to Stormy Daniels. All of them relate to false entries on business records. The Stormy Daniels case may be fruit of the poisonous tree in and of itself, not only because of DA Bragg's office's own prior investigations and the fact that one of their own prosecutors wrote a book on this and did a media tour based on an ongoing investigation, meaning they've already politicized it. Also, just again, it's very weak. Court date in December, so we won't really be hearing a lot. Well, you're going to hear the challenges on it, but in terms of the evidence and the prosecutors defending their case, you're not going to hear about that for a while. But beside the point, this is Trump's statement on this on Truth Social. Trump said this, quote, "Wow, District Attorney Bragg just illegally leaked the various points and complete information." You get this? Bragg himself, Trump's accusing Bragg of committing a crime on this, on the pathetic indictment against me. I know the reporter, and so unfortunately does he. This means that he must be immediately indicted. Trump is calling for Alvin Bragg himself to be indicted for leaking to a journalist the contents of the case, which Trump is saying is illegal. And Trump's, of course, accusing it based on his knowledge of both the journalist and of, whatever he knows on the inside. Trump continues stating, now if he wants to really clean up his reputation, he will do the honorable thing and, as district attorney, indict himself, which would be interesting to watch. He will go down in judicial history, and his Trump-hating wife will be, I am sure, very proud of him. It's Trump's opinion, at least. Let me show you this, folks. This is Trump. Actually, he came out and gave a speech shortly after all of this. This is what Trump had to say regarding the case, regarding Stormy Daniels, and so on. Let me play it for you.
This indictment, I find it very curious that the entire indictment, which goes on for, 16 pages.
Interject. Sorry, I mentioned wrong. So this is basically the problem with the case. I'll show you Trump's statements a bit later. But basically, I mentioned there are gaps within the case itself. Gaps which could actually get the case moved out from New York into a different district. And if it's moved to a different district, you're not going to be dealing with the fact that New York basically is, you're not going to have a fair trial. There's a chance that if the case, even with all these gaps, even with all these problems, is still held in New York, that because of the fact that New York is frankly so utterly corrupt and so utterly, politically biased, that Trump, even with false evidence, could be prosecuted. And one of the big problems I mentioned is that Alvin Bragg, in the indictment, did not clearly define what the main crime was that he's using to justify some of the key parts of this indictment. That major glaring gap, aside from the fact that that could actually get part of this probably thrown out, could actually be used in the short term to have Trump probably move this case out of New York. NTD, I was on the broadcast yesterday, which is why I didn't do the show yesterday. I hope you all got to watch it. NTD actually had some great interviews on this. Let me play this interview, which explains this very well. I'll show you now.
In terms of this indictment, I find it very curious that the entire indictment, which goes on for, 16 pages, I believe, with 34 counts, it says that Trump, beginning while he was president, this is very important to note, beginning on Valentine's Day 2017, with intent to defraud and intent to commit another crime or aid and conceal in the commission thereof, blah, 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 made a false entry in the business records of an enterprise. And then it goes on to talk about either invoice entries, checks, or ledger entries that are supposedly false. But the key issue, the sort of like missing thing that needs to be focused on is, what is the other crime? I've searched the indictment in vain for any indication of what the other crime is. Now, I heard Alvin Bragg say that that other crime is apparently a federal election law crime, but I don't see that spelled out here. And for me as a lawyer who's in a lot of complex litigation, I think that what that's indicating is that they specifically wrote this indictment to try to keep it out of federal court. Because if they indicate that it involves a crime that went to a time period when Trump was in office and went to a federal election crime as to the conduct that led to President Donald Trump getting into office, that is a colorable connection to his federal office. And if so, he can remove the case under the federal officer removal statute. He has 30 days from today to do that, which I've looked at the calendar on, and that is May 4th.
You get that, folks? Let me show you another take on that just to show it's not just us saying it. This is Liberty Daily, and it says this. Imagine trying, well, first of all, it says Alvin Bragg faces the inconvenient truth as people notice no actual law is cited in Trump indictments. It says, imagine trying to play a baseball game without having a baseball. That's the hand that Soros-backed Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has dealt himself in his quest to fulfill his orange man bad commitment to take down President Donald J. Trump. As attorney Robert Barnes noted on Twitter after reviewing court documents, no law was cited. And he said, quote, "The indictment is legally insufficient on its face. New York state law does not make it a crime to influence an election. Federal law does not make it a crime either. Maybe that's why no law is actually cited in the indictment, nor are the facts sufficient." Folks, no law cited, insufficient facts. Federal law doesn't include this. New York law doesn't include this. Keep in mind, this is what they're using to justify breaking precedent, going not only after a former president of the United States of America, which has never been done before, and to go after the leading candidate of the Republican Party and the leading contender in the upcoming elections, very soon, in fact, for the President of the United States, and done in such a way that the next court hearing is right before the Republican primaries. This is the extremely shaky, illegitimate, and frankly should be illegal, in my opinion, grounds that Alvin Bragg is bringing this case. An absolute embarrassment to the American justice system. This is every judge in America, every prosecutor in America, the DOJ, they should be embarrassed for the legal system of the United States of America and what this presents to the world in terms of what we stand for. If this shaky, illegitimate case with these glaring loopholes can be brought forward to interfere with an election, and that is exactly what it is doing, whether that's the intent or not. And Biden's going to take the blame for it. The Democrats are going to take the blame for it, which even a lot of Democrats are noting as well. One more part on this and we'll move on. It continues, quote, "The indictment is legally insufficient on its face. New York state law does not make it a crime to influence an election. Federal law does not make it a crime." And, well, I don't know over that. Now, Bragg also could not keep it as a misdemeanor, right? I should note. Because, again, as we mentioned yesterday on the NTD news broadcast, the way this is framed, the way that Bragg elevated this from a misdemeanor to a felony had to involve this very weird loophole where the crime is not properly stated. And because they don't properly define the crime, I don't see how this could even be used to indict somebody regardless of anything else. But aside from that point, Alvin Bragg had to do that in order to make this case even anything, because the case, the misdemeanor charge, was already past the statute of limitations. In other words, Alvin Bragg had no case. He could not legally charge Trump on a misdemeanor based on the actual content of the crimes as they were. In order to charge Trump, he had to elevate these misdemeanor crimes to felony crimes, and the loophole he used to elevate them from misdemeanor to felony is based on the fact that he's saying Trump violated a crime which is not even properly stated in the indictment. And so Bragg went through a giant loop himself in order to even charge Trump in the first place. Now, aside from the breaking of precedent, going after a former president, going after a leading candidate for the presidential election, Bragg is also violating other common precedents. Like, you normally don't charge people with this anyways. Normally, the stuff he's charging Trump for, even if Trump did it, are not things that people get charged for. It also breaks the track record of Alvin Bragg, who has done the opposite on most cases, where he's lowering federal crimes to misdemeanors, meaning it's showing inherent bias on his part. And in addition to that as well, even the ability of, again, the way he's using this loophole to try to elevate a misdemeanor to a felony, that is also a violation of precedent. He's changing the laws on multiple fronts, changing his normal behavior to an extreme degree, and doing it in such a way to make it interfere with the election of the President of the United States come 2024. You letting that sit in, folks? Let me show you this. It goes further. Manhattan prosecutor overcharged Trump. And the weak case could backfire with the jury, according to a legal analyst with the Epoch Times. At least one we have quoted here. It says the sheer number of counts, 34 felonies, which sounds very big on paper. Even the leftist media isn't buying it, I should note. In my opinion, 34 felonies, that's meant to be shock and awe, right? That is a shock and awe headline making statement. Trump facing 34 felonies. And I'll tell you, a lot of voters, they're not going to think any further than that. They're going to be like, oh, he's a criminal. I always knew he's a criminal. He's a racist and he's a bigot. Well, what did he say to make him a racist and a bigot? Well, I don't know. He wants to have a border. Doesn't Biden say that? Right? People who don't think beyond the narratives, in other words, this will very likely impact them. 34 felonies? Oh, they're going to got him this time. You know what I mean? The problem with that, it's basically 34 crimes repeated 34. It's one crime repeated 34 times, basically. And they're noting this. The sheer number of counts, 34 felonies, filed against the former president, Donald Trump, is surprising and appears to be a classic example of a prosecutor overcharging a defendant, legal analysts said on April 4th in the aftermath of historic criminal proceedings against the 2024 presidential candidate. John Banzaf III, a professor emeritus at George Washington University Law School, and I'll get into why he matters, because he's actually not, from what I get, he's not really a Trump supporter, said he would not be surprised if these seemingly excessive charges will induce jurors to acquit Trump, find him innocent. They may see the whole case as unfair. And he said, quote, I think even a jury which may not have too much legal expertise is going to look over and say at this and say, well, this is repetitious. Repetitious because it's the same crime charged 34 times. Yeah, I'd say that's repetition, right? Let me explain. Now, he used this analogy If a person was accused of a bank robbery, instead of charging him with robbing one bank, because, hey, you robbed a bank, right? Hypothetically speaking, you robbed a bank, let's charge you with robbing a bank. The prosecutor instead would load up 33 other charges, such as he crossed the street against the red light, was double parked, shot off his gun, and he carried a gun when he shouldn't. But you know, Banzhaf said, to most people, they would say that was one crime, one bank robbery. Banzhaf, ironically, was the attorney who filed a complaint against Trump in Georgia. So I'm making the case, folks. This guy is not I don't think at least, he's not a Trump supporter. This lawyer who's saying this thing could get, basically the jury could find him innocent because of the ridiculous way they made the charges. This is the guy who's, again, bringing the complaint against Trump in Georgia. And keep in mind, the folks in Georgia have a real interest in this because, as a lot of even Democrats are noting, they think they should have charged Trump in Georgia first, because they're trying to do like a cascading series of charges against Trump. Trump gets charged for, the January 6th inciting an insurrection, right? That's their big whammy they're trying to get. There's the Trump was interfering with the elections and trying to pressure people into, investigating. That was the Georgia charge. Very similar to what they tried impeaching him with Ukraine and so on, trying to reopen the investigation, ironically, into like Hunter Biden. And they instead first charge him with this extremely weak and ridiculous case. And the people who believe the other cases are stronger are actually unhappy about it, because this case is going to taint the other ones. Any further indictment of Trump, any further charges against him are going to now be tainted in context of this. And the guy who brought the charges against Trump in Georgia is saying this. Let me continue. He states, right? He continues. Of course, leading an investigation that there were alleged interference in the 2020 presidential election. He said, quote, that investigation is still ongoing, and Banzhaf thinks the New York case could have an adverse effect on the Georgia case. So Banzhaf, who's noting that they probably overcharged Trump, and because they overcharged him, it's going to mess with the jury, and the jury's going to be like, why are you charging? How could you possibly take one crime and repeat it in different contexts 34 times and try to charge somebody with 34 felonies for one crime? It's technically one misdemeanor elevated artificially using a loophole which is not clearly defined, and probably is going to get the whole thing possibly thrown out in the first place. One crime elevated illegitimately to a felony from a misdemeanor and then repeated 34 times. And Banzhaf is saying that because they're doing this, because of Alvin Bragg, that this is probably going to have a bad impact on the Georgia case, the one that they believe actually may be stronger, which I'd say there are loopholes in that too, but you could argue it's actually stronger. After dozens of charges were filed against Trump in New York, the notion that more could be piled on in Georgia or elsewhere can add to the impression that Trump is a political target, you don't say, which does not sit well with jurors. And the guy who brought the charges against Trump in Georgia is the guy saying this. He said that's why he thinks there's a risk of jury nullification, in which jurors rebel against a seemingly unfair prosecution regardless of evidence. And folks, the loopholes within this, the glaring gaps within this, and frankly the pushback against Alvin Bragg himself, I want to make it clear this is not even a partisan issue anymore. I mean, the degree to which Alvin Bragg just shot Joe Biden in the foot. He didn't even shoot himself in the foot. He shot Joe Biden in the foot. The degree to which he just did this, hypothetically speaking, of course, is astronomical. The Fox News empire, the Murdoch empire, after some of the J6 videos came out with the J6 committee, they were turning against Trump. That meant New York Times, that meant New York Post, that meant Wall Street Journal. They had turned against Trump. And now they're like full on board with Trump because of this case. Folks, Even CNN is like defending Trump. That this is how far they have pushed this. Even CNN. And many people who absolutely, and under normal circumstances, at least look like they completely hate Trump, like despise him, they're having problems with this case. Let me show you. Case in point. I'll show you a couple of videos of CNN, in fact, folks. This is the first video I'll show you. This is CNN discussing the case. And they're talking about some of the problems with this.
Cases right now being pursued? I worry. I mean, look, if this is the only pebble that gets thrown at Donald Trump, it's a very small pebble. If it's the first pebble in an avalanche of other indictments that strike more to the heart of, I think, people's core concern about Donald Trump, which is his threat to democracy. So this is the first pebble. The next one is about the election interference in Georgia. The next one is about the coup, the insurrection, January 6th. The next one's about him hoarding these documents and why. Then it begins to fit. But if this is the only pebble, it's not much of a pebble. And I do think the backlash against this pebble might cow other people who might otherwise have been courageous enough to step forward.
And I won't play the whole thing. But if you watch the whole thing, it's actually pretty interesting. But you have two other people. I didn't watch the entire episode, but they're in agreement. You have other folks sitting at the table agreeing with this. And they're admitting that they kind of whipped themselves up over this. And there's nothing there. That thing is it's a giant nothing burger. This is John Bolton on CNN after all this. John Bolton, again, not in any way, at least not in my impression, not a Trump supporter. My impression of John Bolton is he hates Trump. And this is John Bolton talking about the case that Alvin Bragg revealed yesterday. And frankly, that the thing is just extremely, extremely weak. Let me play you John Bolton talking about this.
One big picture, what do you think of the indictment?
Well, speaking as someone who very strongly does not want Donald Trump to get the Republican presidential nomination, I'm extraordinarily distressed by this document. I think this is even weaker than I feared it would be. And I think it's easily subject to being dismissed or a quick acquittal for Trump. Just speaking, going back to the days when I represented Jim Buckley and Gene McCarthy and the constitutional challenge to the underlying federal statute here passed in 1974, I can say there is no basis in the statutory language to say that Trump's behavior forms either a contribution or an expenditure under federal law, the two key definitions at issue here. If it did, it would mean that every single expenditure a candidate made could be taken to have something to do with his campaign. Do I buy a $1 comb to comb my hair or a $10 comb to comb my hair? If you can construe the statute to cover this behavior, then I think it violates the First Amendment because you're deeply into territory that makes this statute absolutely, the federal statute, too vague for enforcement. And as what I understood the district attorney to say that he thinks there's a New York election law involved here, all I can say is the Federal Election Campaign Act absolutely preempts any state or local law to the contrary. How could it be otherwise? You've got one law governing corporate finance in a presidential election at the federal level. You're going to have 50 state laws interfering with it. So he's just wrong on the applicability of the New York statute.
You get that? Folks, that is CNN. That's John Bolton. I'm going to show you more of this. Let's jump over to Epoch TV for the rest, though, because I want to go a bit deeper into this. I'll show you what Biden's reaction is. We'll go into Fox News. Again, remember the Murdoch Empire, which includes Fox News. They had turned against Trump. This has done a 180 so quickly and done so in a way that's probably going to, frankly, win Trump a lot of support he probably wouldn't have had otherwise. And not only that, but severely damaged the potential impact that the other indictments Trump was going to face. Really, folks, this is going pretty much exactly like I thought it would. If you watch the episodes leading up to this is pretty much going exactly like I thought it would, but maybe even a bit more so because it has more loopholes than even I anticipated. This is a giant giant nothing burger, and Trump is going to ride this thing straight through the elections. This is, and I'll repeat it again, this is probably going to benefit Trump a whole lot more than it's going to hurt him. And it has fired up his base. It has fired him up in ways that he was not previously. Trump was actually a lot more muted and a lot more calm and a lot more peaceful prior to this. And his base was becoming a lot more kind of, a little calmer, I should say, right? Folks, I almost forgot, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by American Hartford Gold. I'm going to jump over. Now, as I've been talking about, folks, inflation is going to continue and likely get worse. Even Fed Chair Powell is warning us to brace ourselves. Well, there's one way to hedge against inflation, which is getting, honestly, a lot worse. American Hartford Gold makes it simple and easy to diversify your savings and retirement accounts with physical gold and silver. With one short phone call, they can have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or into your IRA or 401k. American Hartford Gold is one of the highest rated firms in the country with an A-plus rating from the BBB and thousands of satisfied clients. If you call them now, they'll give you up to $2,500 of free silver and a free safe on qualifying orders, so don't wait. Call them now. That's 877-260-2764, 877-260-2764, or text Joshua to 65532. Again, that's 877-260-2764, or text Joshua to 65532. And big thanks out to American Hartford Gold to sponsor today's episode. And also, if you want to see something interesting, look at the charts of gold. Look at the increase. Those of you who bought gold are probably pretty happy right now. Previously, not giving any financial advice, but have a look at the charts when you have some free time. You'll find it interesting. That said, folks, let's jump over exclusively to Epoch TV. I'm going to show you what Fox News is saying. This same Murdoch empire that was turning against Trump just before all this. And look, folks, CNN, Fox, the people who were not even probably going to cover Trump's speeches, all they're talking about now is Trump. They weren't even airing Trump's speeches. They weren't even airing his stuff. Whether they like it or not now, he is the front runner. He is the biggest thing, not only for Republicans, but for the entire focus of the United States. Even Trump's opponents, when they interview them, people are not like, so, Mr. Pence, what is your campaign, message? They're like, Mr. Pence, what do you think about Donald Trump? You know what I mean? Trump is the talking point. Trump is the issue. Trump is the debate. And Alvin Bragg, this is on his head, frankly, as far as the Democrats are concerned. I'll show you more. Let's jump over to Epoch TV. Before we jump over, though, we do have a new documentary in the works, almost done. My colleague Roman Balmakavi does her show Facts Matter. He's doing a documentary on the food crisis and the question of, do they really want to make you eat bugs? His documentary is called Eat the Bugs, and they're currently doing some fundraising for the last stages of it. Let me show you the trailer for that, then we'll jump over.
For the past 6 months or so, my team and I have been working on a full-length documentary project called Eat the Bugs, which exposes the topic that I believe is incredibly important to almost everyone, the global war on farmers, as well as the agenda that's behind the curtains that's actually pushing the entire thing. Now, as many of you know, this all started when my team and I traveled over to the Netherlands sometime last year in order to cover the farmer protests that were happening over there. And after meeting with the local farmers and hearing their stories about how they were quite literally being pushed off their generational farms by their government, well, I was shocked, to say the least. But after we dug deeper into it, it became obvious that this was not confined to the Netherlands. In fact, this war on farmers is indeed global. It's happening everywhere, including right here in the US. And for some odd reason, it coincides perfectly with this trend of celebrities promoting edible insects. And so we've been traveling for the better part of the last year on a mission to really, for one, understand this global war on farmers, the agenda behind it, as well as what it really means for the future of the food on our supermarket store shelves, as well as what common people like you and I, who are just caught up in the middle of all this, can actually do to prevent a future where our kids have no option rather than to eat bugs. And so right now, we're putting together all of the interviews and all of the findings from our journey into this new awesome documentary, the one that's called Eat the Bugs. And I really cannot wait to share it with you this upcoming summer. And if you would like to help back this project, to help with the funding in order to not only finish editing the documentary, but also to make sure that once it actually comes out, it reaches as many people across the world as possible, well, that would be absolutely awesome. You can head on over to epicoriginal.com/eatthebugs, or you can click on that link right there in the description box, and there you can sign up for more updates, you can share the project with your friends and family, and you can also donate to see the thing to fruition, as well as to share it out to ever more people. Because quite frankly, we here at the Epoch Times, we've been pouring all of our money into this project to the point that we've been eating nonstop ramen noodles. And pretty soon, we might have to eat the bugs ourselves in order to fund it. And so if you want to help us out, please head on over to epicoriginal.com/eatthebugs and help bring this thing to light. Let's make it happen. This is gross.
Anyways, folks, again, that's our new documentary come out, Eat the Bugs. They are looking for people to help fundraise it. They're doing fundraising for it. So again, check that out. That said, let's jump over to Epoch TV exclusively, and I will see you there. And folks, thank you all for being here. Let's talk about what's happening with